Good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to join us for our Zeald webinar series, Keep Calm and Get Digital. My name is Lisa, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. A common trend that is continuing to develop is that more and more consumers are moving to purchasing and inquiring online. According to New Zealand Post's The Full Download, there was a 22% increase in September compared to last year in online spend. As more businesses move to the online space, it is important that you focus on how to make your business stand out. One way to make your business stand out is by having quality products and product images to help improve conversion, convey quality, and build trust. Today's topic, product photography tips and tricks, is specifically designed in order to help you with that. Now, a few quick housekeeping rules before I hand over is just that if you haven't joined us before, our format is pretty simple. We'll have a presentation from our speakers and you can ask questions at any point during this time. After the presentation is finished, we will have a question section at the end before wrapping up. If you currently can't hear me speaking, then you may need to look at your audio settings on the Zoom toolbar. If you want to ask a question at any point, please do so by using the chat or the Q&A button at the bottom. Raise hands, so this is also available to ask questions if you would like to do so verbally. So this is where we would allow you to, your microphone to be used and you can talk to us and ask your questions. And if you've missed any of this, I have great news. We record all our webinars and have them available on our website, YouTube, and we will also send the recording to all attendees today. So I'm very excited for today's webinar as we have Debbie Foreman and Mark Ryan as our guest speakers from Three Little Wishes. Three Little Wishes specialise in photography and providing workshops for others to learn. And both Debbie and Mark have vast experience with product photography and are here to share these tips. So I believe you will thoroughly enjoy today's session, and I'd now like to invite Debbie to begin.
Hi everyone, I'm Debbie. I'm the founder of Three Little Wishes, and I'm just going to give you a really brief history of what we're all about. Hang on, I'm just going to make sure I've started my video. Yes, have I started my video as well?
Yes, you have. Yep.
Okay, you'll have to bear with me, everyone. This is the first time I've ever done a webinar. Okay, so when did we start? We started life back in 2006 as a wedding and real estate photographers, and then we branched into photography workshops in 2011. Basically, I wanted to start workshops to teach people how to use the DSLR camera, which can be rather complicated, but we wanted to teach it in a fast and easy manner, and created short, sharp workshops that basically would fit into everybody's lives. I wanted the workshops to be practical and totally different from the traditional way of teaching in a classroom, an alternative to evening classes or many months spent in college. The idea also was to strip the lessons of padding and just to get to the nuts and bolts of how to take a great picture and to understand your camera without having to wade through a camera manual, which are very boring. Or if you wanted to look at doing photography as a profession, I wanted us to be there to help and guide people to do this. So, as I say, we launched in 2011. We did it actually with a grab one deal, and immediately it took off. It crashed all the telephones. So the response to the advert was just amazing, and I really felt that we were onto something. So we started off with beginners and intermediates, and very soon it became apparent that everybody wanted a lot more from us. So we branched into all sorts of things, very popular one-on-ones. We attracted some great top tutors to teach our students. And before I knew it, we were doing courses in landscape, real estate photography, all sorts of things, which has been really exciting. A fair few years ago, we got the endorsement from Canon New Zealand. So we work in association with them now. This doesn't mean that we only teach Canon. We teach basically every make and model of camera. It just means that with Canon working with us, we fortunately have a whole lot of Canon cameras and lenses that we can lend to our students, which basically gives them the chance to try before you buy, and to avoid making any expensive mistakes with their choices. So basically today, we run workshops in Auckland and Wellington, and nearly every weekend you'll find a Three Little Wishes workshop somewhere. But what we have found that one of our biggest growth areas is now with companies who want to bring their photography in-house. We go in and we teach a small team how to photograph products for their websites and their social media. Again, making sure that we keep it really simple. We help them with the setup of a studio and how to address any problems that they have with actually taking these images. So really, I suppose that sort of leads on to today and showing you how to take good photographs easily and quickly. So with all of that in mind, I will hand you back to Lisa and let you enjoy what Mark has to tell you. Yeah, we'll take it from there. Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks, Debbie. That's fantastic. Cool. So just continuing on. So yeah, a little bit more about Debbie as well. So she is the founder of Three Little Wishes, with vast experience in the commercial sector, has worked all over the place, but in particular for kind of London premier real estate companies, and so has also won awards for lighting interior design company before moving to Auckland, and is really keen, as you can see, to share her knowledge with others to be successful with photography. And then a little bit about Mark as well. So he is a professional photographer and mentor at Three Little Wishes, with over 25 years of experience, and likewise has won numerous awards for what he has photographed, basically, and so has a master's degree in virtual arts and designs, and is seen as a senior tutor at 2 design colleges in Australia, as well as being an expert in Adobe Photoshop, and will be taking us through today just around product photography for your website. So now I'd like to welcome Mark to take us through.
Hello, everyone. So here we are with our today's coverage on product photography, and I hope that we can solve some of your problems or questions at the end. Basically, what we're trying to do today is cover aspects of composition, what sort of lighting you need for various products. Establishing the characteristics of the products are very important. If you've got something really shiny, how do you light that? If you've got something that's got a lot of texture, how do you present that as a, in terms of lighting to show that texture? We talk about the lighting, which in terms of natural lighting or artificial or speed lights or flash. What sort of equipment do you need in terms of lenses? Maybe I'll show you a couple of lenses that we use primarily. How we set up the shot. So we have these various little diagrams, hopefully very simple, that will show that. So we talk about the the studio food photography in particular. We're going to be talking a bit about that. This slide here that shows actually Debbie photographing some delicious looking food. You'll notice some very large soft boxes in a studio. Now, what we try and do is, if you need a studio, that's fine. That is okay to use. However, we can get away from using those soft boxes simply by using a small speed light. And I'll just show you a little speed light here, little Canon speed light. That's often all you need, maybe 1 or 2 of these, sometimes 3, but basically that simplifies the lighting rather than having a large studio with lots of soft boxes. So are these highly reflective? Do they show, well, we've talked about the reflections, and I'll just go to a little slide there with the 3 ways of taking a product, traditionally anyway. Horizontal, you can see the little slide there where you're shooting directly on the same axis at 90 degrees of your product. Now, this is often meant for wine bottles or products you just want to see the front of the product. The second way is to take what they call a 3/4 view, which is roughly 45 degrees angle. So let's have a look at the other image here with the slide. You'll see at the 45 degrees angle. This often is the most common way, especially with maybe items that you're trying to show the top of, like the little boxes or candles or whatever that you want to see a more three-dimensional view of it. So sometimes toys or tools need that 3/4 look as well, and sometimes food. And the third and final way is actually using the top view directly over the top, often referred to as flat lays. Often with fabrics, some clothing manufacturers want to spread out their clothing on a bench and you look straight down at it so you can see the shape, the collars, the characteristics of that clothing. And sometimes with food, you can often do really nice work looking straight down onto food sitting on a particular background. You can have wood or slate. There's a whole range of backgrounds you can use, and it can be very effective. Okay, so we've got some food combos coming up here. So this is a series of shots we've taken. As you can see, all of those 3/4 flat lays, horizontal shots. So we talk about the lighting. So soft light, smooth shadows. Do you make them hard lighting with very strong shadows? How much of it do you want in focus? So that combines this aspect of depth of field. And to create that, the lenses that you use for your camera are very important. So for example, a lot of people use their food photography with what they call a nifty 50, which is a 50mm lens with a 1.8 aperture. Basically what that does when you're shooting at those wide apertures, you get a very shallow depth of field where the background's completely out of focus. And sometimes with the food in that top right-hand slide, you'll see there with the food, tomatoes and stuff. Other lenses we use are things like macro lenses, like a 60mm macro, or if you've got a full frame camera, it'll be a 100mm macro lens. And that allows you to get really in close, a lot closer than the 50mm 1.8. So moving from that point on, we can then talk about a couple of images we've got here. Using an iPhone, the one on the left, the same creature, believe it or not. And the other one taken with a single lens reflex camera. Now, as you can see, the one on the left, there's not much control over the lighting. The phones just basically take what it sees. And some people use window lighting, which that one was taken with just the windows in the house here. The problem with window lighting is often just the variation of light that you'll get during the day. It can be sunlight, it can be very, very bright, or it can be diffused. So you don't have much control over it. So the one on the right there is a small, the same creature sitting on a translucent piece of acrylic, which was lit underneath and lit up from the top.
So that the translucent acrylic that they're sitting on, is that important?
It can be, yeah. I do have a large sheet in the garage, which would be rather big to bring out, but however, it's roughly, it can vary from about 2mm to 4mm. And it's a semi-translucent piece of plastic or acrylic. And you should be able to see the shadow of your hand behind it so the light can transmit through it.
Right.
So that's basically, that means you have what we call a shadowless product.
Right.
Which is very useful for graphic designers, for publications where they have to clear cut.
Yes.
So The next one is an iPhone and the single lens reflex camera again, little products. You'll notice the ones on the left with the iPhone, again, you've got high reflections on the surface of each product.
Yes.
And basically the one on the right, those reflections are minimized.
Yes.
There's no underlighting on that. Basically, it's just on a white sheet of acrylic. It can be on white card as well.
Yes. Okay.
So the iPhone can do a good job sometimes, especially the latest phones. I think they're looking pretty impressive with the quality of the image.
Yes.
But again, you still have that issue of lighting,
Right.
which is, I think, the key part of product photography. So again, if we're taking food, looking back to food here, this is a very simple diagram. The light, the red flashlight there, is bouncing into a white wall, and then it then bounces up into the ceiling, and you can see the direction of the light, and it comes back onto the food, which is on the base there. And this creates a shadow on the side of the food, which shadows are very important because they give you that three-dimensional look. If you had the light coming from the front, it's very flat and you lose that crunchiness, which you often want to get from food, or and food does have a lot of texture. And this white...
Sorry, can I ask,
yes?
is food photography important to get a shadow, but other photography products not the shadow? Generally it's associated with food, but smaller products, we'll talk about that, where the light comes down vertically. Right, that was the other method you were saying.
Shortly to show that. But in the sense of food here, sometimes those shadows can be very strong.
Right.
And we have a reflector to reflect the light back into those shadows.
Right.
Traditionally, in a photographic studio, you would have a large softbox slightly behind the subject. So your subject's here and the camera's over here. The softbox would be slightly hovering above it, but from behind.
Yes.
We can do the same effect with the softbox by using a flash. And there's a principle which we'll talk about later. It says a small light source creates hard shadows.
Yes.
And that small light source, if it's bounced into a wall a couple of meters away from that flash unit, will become a larger area. And if it's bouncing off a roof, it becomes even larger. So you're creating a whole new softbox just with a small flash unit.
Oh, interesting.
So moving on to the shot that this was taken, you'll see this beautiful food out of a place called Love Asia out at East Tamaki, I think it was. So you can see the crunchiness of everything.
Yes.
And if you look carefully at all those shadows, they're still there. There's a bit of detail in it, but there's a lovely reflection coming off the floor, which gives that a little bit more 3D effect as well. And
that's all because you've bounced the light off the wall, off the ceiling, and then down onto the food.
That was one simple flash unit.
Right.
I understand, to create that.
That's interesting.
And when it comes to food, styling is very important.
Yes, definitely.
So if you've got a stylist, that will make your life a bit simpler.
Yes.
In this case, we had a lovely Chinese lady that knew just all the right bits and pieces, and
yes,
we sort of worked together quite happily with that. So you'll see now, I've taken some food shots with the iPhone. You can see one on the left and one on the right. The iPhone's done a not too bad job, but that was just with window lighting. I can now, with the flashlight, get a more centralized effect.
Yeah. You can kind of see more depth. I don't know if that's the right technical word, but in the right head image.
Yes.
Is it depth that I'm seeing, or clarity?
Yes, well, probably depth and clarity. The depth of the one on the right is actually because of the shadows.
Right.
And again, we're looking onto the shadow side. If you look at that tomato or the plate, at the base of the plate, there's a slight shadow there. And that gives that 3D or depth effect.
Right, got it.
Okay, so if we're looking at highly reflective objects such as a bottle of wine or In the case, I'll just grab this here and show you. And I've got a shot of this later. This thing here is highly reflective. You can see the light reflecting off it. And this diagram shows how to deal with that. If we have a light source coming up to the ceiling and coming down, it no longer reflects because the light is bouncing away onto the surface. If you had a light horizontally or even at 3/4, it would hit that subject and you'd see the big blast of light on the side.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, interesting. So knowing how light works and how it travels and what it bounces off of is really kind of key.
There's a simple analogy I use. It's just like if you have a hose and you fire a hose directly at something, it's a solid, hard piece of water, or hard volume of water. Refer to that as light, and you'll get a very deep shadow behind it. But if you fire the hose to the ceiling, it's going to spread the light out a lot larger.
Yes.
Get a much softer, more delicate lighting technique. And here, the next slide here, you'll see the iPhone and the single lens reflex camera, DSLR, D standing for digital, by the way.
Right.
You'll see the iPhone one, you can see all the window reflections on the side.
Yeah, you can. It's very great. And then the shadows as well.
Indeed. And there's also a distortion. The latest phones have a zoom, which is quite good, so you can actually get rid of that distortion. But traditionally, most phones are fairly wide angle lenses, so you'll get that slight barrel distortion.
It is too. Now that I've only recognised it once you've said it, that it is slightly barreled.
But in saying that, some of the new phones have a zoom, which is quite good for that reason.
But the one on the right definitely looks more professional. Indeed. It's definitely what I'd want on my website, if I was selling that product. Yeah.
We had a company many years ago that makes spray can paint for the forestry industry, and their cans were highly reflective. They were basically black, glossy. And they'd had a few photographers try to photograph it, but they weren't getting the result they wanted. So I went there and solved the problem simply by doing that top lighting straight down. And you can see that on the right hand side.
Yeah, much better.
Now this surprised me. The macarons or macarons. How would you pronounce that, Debbie? I wonder.
I don't know. I always say macarons.
Yeah, macarons.
No.
They're delicious, by the way. We might have some later on.
You try it on the taste.
Now, I took this on the iPhone, which I thought wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it's not bad, right?
There's... So,
it's funny that you probably, if you didn't see the right one, you'd think, yeah, that's a good photo, that's good enough, But it's when you see the DSLR version, you're like, oh, actually, no, it can be a lot better.
It's a little bit crunchier. Now, the reason I have a white background behind there is if you're marketing this, often the text that space can be used for text,
right?
Or you can drop in a completely different photo in behind, so it'll give a sense of ambience, or it could be somewhere else. And I've given an example here.
On the screen.
There we go. Yeah. So I've taken this photograph up at Sandy Bay, and I popped it in behind the
right behind
the macaron. So it looks as if that's on a bench or a deck at that particular bay.
Yes.
So those white backgrounds are often very important to use for a whole lot of reasons, and in this case, just to drop in another image.
And you're right, because you see often like the name of the product or a caption around something, and that's where you'd be putting it, in that white space.
Indeed, and even on that image, there's still room for text or the brand. So some products definitely need the brand or some words, a copy line that promotes that product. Let's have a look. So lighting. Now there's that sheet of acrylic you can see. That large sheet there. And you can see a large softbox over the top.
Right, is that what a softbox is? They're huge.
So this goes back to the very basic principle. It says the smaller the light source, the harder and more defined the shadows are. And the larger the light source, the softer the shadows. So you could either use a softbox or you could use a simple flash.
Right.
And use the ceiling as a large softbox.
Right.
The quality of the light, it's always important if you are bouncing off a ceiling to make sure it's white, or otherwise if it's got a colored beige color, everything will be quite beige or warm. But again, using Photoshop can correct that. But you try not to spend too much time in Photoshop if you can, but it is important.
What about textures on your ceiling?
No problems there.
No,
just spread the light out.
Okay.
Basically, it's just creating a large circular beam of light that's coming down soft, creating very defined shadows.
Yeah.
Now, under that sheet of acrylic, if we have a look at often referred to as a light table, and this is that white table often is a curved surface, so there's no horizon. So if you place something on that surface, there's no defined horizon. The curve comes up behind. If you just had a wall, there'd be a thin line running through the back of that product. So what we do is we have a flash unit that bounces onto a reflector or a white piece of card, and it comes up through not only the base of the light table, but also the back. So everything's perfectly illuminated.
Wow, okay.
And you can see bouncing off the ceiling, and getting the ratio is important. And I think one of the
amount of light coming from above and below.
Yes, and
right.
Before you even start this, it's a good idea to have the flash, if you, in this case, with 2 flashes, use one at a time just to see what it's doing.
Mm.
You can have flash meters. I've still got one somewhere, but I hardly ever use it because the digital camera shows you exactly what you're getting. You can see what you see, what you produce is what you see.
Yeah,
and,
so if you just take a photo, oh no, I need more light here.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So you can see there that the getting that ratio right is pretty important.
And I like what you said about you could just put a piece of white card on the floor.
Yes.
Like if we're in my lounge, I could have just popped that, and even my ceiling's not white, so I could do that on the ceiling, I'm assuming, as well, just to help with that.
Yeah, indeed. So then we go to, so this next shot here, I think was, I think, Debbie, you asked me to do this, I think, from memory.
It was a very nice lady who had an online shop over in, I can't remember the name of the place. It was up near Albany. And she was having huge problems with trying to photograph these tiny little bottles because she was just getting so much reflection on them. And when she put them onto the website, she just wasn't satisfied with the results. And once she had these all photographed correctly, I know her sales increased dramatically. Oh, she was delighted, absolutely delighted. But very good products as well.
I think that's so true. People underestimate the impact of good images on their website.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you've got to present them so that people will look at them and want to buy them. But if they're sort of an off-white colour and they're not very well presented, then you skip onto the next website. You lose interest, don't you? Yeah. So it makes a huge difference. It really does.
One important thing about this I wanted to stress was that we often have these ratios with 60% photography, 40% Photoshop. And sometimes it could be the other way around. It would be 40% photography and 60% Photoshop. This is probably 50-50, but on the right-hand side, you'll see a screenshot of the layers in Photoshop. And you'll notice that the bottles, I actually photographed each individual bottle separately. And then I placed them where I thought it would look good and grouped them together. So at the top right-hand layer, layer 4, I think it says, you'll see the group of bottles sitting by themselves.
Right.
And then you'll see the that white fabric. That is a separate shot as well.
Right.
And then the bag is a separate shot. So this allows you to adjust them and arrange them in Photoshop in any position you'd like to have this in front, that at the back, whatever.
And control those shadows, which I imagine is one of the issues.
Yes,
and
indeed.
the reflections. Yeah.
And you'll see in the next slide there that they're the bottles by themselves. And if you go, you can see each individual bottle.
Yeah.
In this case, here's another box. I think it was a candle inside that box. So we took the box separately to show the 3D effect of it. And then we took the next shot, which was of the candle. And then we combined the two together now. You can see now
yes.
you can place that candle anywhere.
Yes, you could.
So
and it's much cleaner, isn't it? Otherwise, you would have had a shadow that you're trying to deal with on the box.
Yes.
But you're still trying to get the 3D nature of the box
indeed.
as well.
That's exactly right. And under that glass, I've put an artificial shadow, and we'll show you how that's done in the next products. This is where the Photoshop really makes a difference. So there is that towel, or that fabric. You can see it's been clear cut, and it looks kind of artificial. It's not. It's just floating in space.
Yes.
But if you have a look at the next image, you'll see there's a lovely shadow underneath.
And because you've controlled it by adding it, it's perfect.
It's a separate thing, and I'm not sure whether it's, I'll just check to see. No, I haven't got the shadow showing it, but that was put behind the subject.
Right.
So the original shot was floating in space, and then between the layers, I put a little bit of a shadow in the front there. So you can see it.
Yeah. Oh, very cool.
Now, bottles, in particular wine bottles, they need that top lighting because of the reflection on the surface. We had an interesting chap who was photographing Graham Norton's Sauvignon Blanc, GN, I think it's called. And for the life of him, he could not photograph the bottle because it had a highly reflective label. And I went out there to solve the problem, but even I was struggling with that one. But again, the lighting through, we bounce the light off the back of a wall. So primarily most of the light is coming, the strongest part of the light is coming through the bottle.
Right.
And you'll see the...
because your camera's on this side and you've got the light coming...
So it's coming off the wall, bouncing back through the bottle. And we've got a top light, which is not as strong as the back light, but that is illuminating the label on the front.
Right.
Otherwise, the label would be just completely dark.
Right, yes.
So if we have a look at the next one here, you'll see what I'm talking about there. It makes the bottle glow, basically.
It does, because it's got the light coming through it. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And that's fine for light-coloured wine, you know, light-coloured bottles. Dark red wine often needs strip lighting either side to show bands of light. I haven't got an example of that, but it's slightly different lighting. Again, you can still light from behind. It shows that ruby red sort of colour coming through the bottle. I've taken an iPhone shot here of the same bottle.
Oh no, I wouldn't want to buy that one.
Doesn't matter how much you liked the wine.
No.
So that's what you often see in the shop, just looking like that. But the advertising around that previous shot, you'll see that it allows you to go, wow, that looks great. You can see the colour.
It's interesting. Not only would I not want to buy it, but I'd expect this one to be cheap. Well, the one before, I was thinking, you know, nice high-end product, you know. It kind of conveys two different messages completely.
So we now have a look at what we've just gone through here. So basically, the controlled lighting environment and natural light, you can use that, especially if you're using that 50mm 1.8 lens. You can just put the food near a window and it should be fine. But again, flash is going to give you more consistency. So often a work area is important. If most food photographers have a kitchen somewhere, if it's a studio, they have a designed kitchen simply for food. because if you're cooking something, it comes out, it has to look fresh, not soggy. There are a lot of artificial techniques of packing food. Like if you have a look at a particular hamburger that's being promoted, it looks, when you go and buy one, the difference is the photo is that the hamburger's that thick, and when you buy it's that thick. So often they put layers in between. So there's a lot of artificial sort of tricks they do. They have spray. You see those tomatoes there, they're spraying water on the tomatoes, that makes it look a little bit fresher. Again, the type of camera and lenses, mainly the lenses are important. And again, styling for the props, very important. You know, that you have a stylist, or if you think you can do it yourself, that's even better. But it can save a lot of time and money just by ringing up a stylist, and they'll come in and make it look fantastic. But that's their job.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, interesting.
So yeah, so that's basically the ideas, the lighting control, the composition, the lenses are very important, and the surfaces that you're photographing on, whether it's wood or ceramic tiles.
And taking things one at a time too, and then bringing them all together.
It
was an interesting concept as well.
I think that's where the Photoshop comes in.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
That's okay.
Lisa.
Awesome.
So I've got my share. Yeah.
Yep, so now we're into our questions segment. So for all of you attending today, if you have any questions, now is your chance to ask those through the Q&A or chat, and we'll just ask those as they pop up. But Rhonda, I understand you had a couple.
Yeah, I do. So one was, why can't I use window lighting? I think you touched on a little bit.
No, we touched on a little bit. The main reason is that in the morning, if you're photographing in the morning, the light is quite warm because as you can imagine, the Earth is a sphere, and when the sun comes up, it hits the atmosphere, and the blue light bends up and away and leaves you with this lovely golden warm light, generally speaking. So as the morning gets progressively on to lunchtime, the light changes from that warm color to a colder blue, the Kelvin degrees, they call it. And then in the afternoon, it goes warm again. So you've got this inconsistency of light that goes completely, can really mess with your photographs. And I've been to a few one-on-ones where they've had problems with that, and they're spending too much time in Photoshop correcting the lights, and often they can't correct enough to make it look as if it was all standard.
Yes.
So again, window lighting is fine if it's soft.
Yes.
But as the sun comes out, there's a blast of light coming in, it's going to increase more light in the room, so you've got a different exposure.
Yeah, and
shutter speed.
I imagine your availability to take your product for photography won't be consistently at 8 a.m. in the morning. And even if it is, the light's changing.
Indeed.
Every day at that particular time.
Indeed,
so you've got to kind of create this artificial lighting that you can count on consistently.
Exactly. So this comes back to our little flash units. Or you can have large soft boxes if you want, but generally speaking, you can do and that's what Three Little Wishes is good at. We tend to sort of make things simple for people and achievable, rather than, do I have to buy all this studio equipment? You don't.
Yeah, nice.
Unless you're doing it as a full-time. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Do
you have another question, Lisa?
Yes, we've had a question from Marie. She's asking if there's any hints on photographing clothes on mannequins.
Yes, mannequins are great. I think, is it Wallace Cotton Line we went to? They had a mannequin there, but they put the clothes on the mannequin. But then in Photoshop, they take the mannequin away, so the clothes actually look as if they're on something, but there's no person in there.
Right.
And I will often photograph, if you've got say a jacket or the shirt, for example, and there's this data at the back here, or the label, or where the collar comes round.
Yes.
I'll photograph that separately and pop that in without the mannequin.
Without the mannequin head.
So the mannequin is really just giving the shape, if you like, for the clothing. But a lot of companies actually take the mannequin away after taking it. And sometimes, as you know, if you get the right mannequin, you have to buy or have to have all the same size of the clothes. So you're not putting a saggy thing on a mannequin or too tight.
Yes.
So you get those little issues, but I think the mannequins are great. I recently did a job for protective masks and stuff.
Yes.
And that was great, except the model, they said, we're going to take his face away and just have the masks. So
it kind of fills out the item.
Yes.
Yes.
So I've got a little mannequin head out there, which you put caps on, or in this case, masks, and that's pretty good.
Yeah. So you're still doing white backgrounds. Your lighting issues are still the same.
Yes. They wanted the background to be clear cut so they could float it on different coloured backgrounds. In that case, backgrounds are very important if you are using a background. Make sure there's no distracting things going on, or it's not too dark behind. But generally, clothing is either flat laid on a real model or on a mannequin.
Yeah.
I hope that answers part of your question.
Yep, so we've actually got 6 questions. They've all been flying in, so we've got quite a few to go through. So David is asking, sort of without going overboard, what are the likely costs to buy the types of lighting devices you've demonstrated today?
Okay, as I said, you've got 2 components, 2 aspects of lighting. You can do a studio lighting, which can be quite expensive. You're looking at very powerful flash units and softboxes. And then you've got the stands to put these things on. So you end up with quite a large area, and that can be quite expensive. Each studio flash unit would be approximately $1,000. So you're looking at 3 flash units, that's $3,000. Softboxes, $200 or $300 each. Stands, probably $100 each. So you're building that up in a really substantial way of money.
And then the camera.
There you go. But getting a small speed lights like these, 700, also you can get a whole range of flash units. The more powerful ones, the better. The Canon's 600 RT is their flagship one model, and that's possibly between $750 and maybe $900, depending where you're buying it from. But that's all you really need, a couple of those. So suddenly your cost comes down considerably.
Yes.
And as long as you've got some nice white ceilings and white walls, you can do almost anything. So the cost, generally speaking, we do try and recommend getting these flash units. And by the way, these flash units aren't on the camera. They're on a stand, and we have what we call a trigger, a little radio signal that sits on your hot shoe of the camera if you've got a DSLR, and that fires the flash
at
remotely.
the same time. Yeah.
So you can have up to possibly 3 of these would be more than enough.
Depending on the size of the things that you're photographer taking photos.
You don't overlight, you don't overcomplicate your lighting, keeping it simple. So often just one of these works, but 2 can be useful, as I mentioned before, with bouncing under a light table. The light table, you can get them from $150 to the Manfrotto, which is probably about $1,500. So.
It's a flash one.
Yes.
Yeah. So
even if the Perspex mark is cheap, isn't it? I think we bought that sheet of Perspex for about $50.
Yes,
So,
go to a plastic.
Yeah, and a couple of white cards. It's incredible how cheap it can be if you improvise.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. You can improvise, and I think a lot of Kiwis do improvise.
It's the Kiwi way, isn't it?
It's the Kiwi word.
Yes.
John's just added on to that one, I guess. So the small handheld soft boxes, where can they easily be purchased, and what would you say is the best brand or the preferred brand?
Any photographic outlets. I think in Auckland we've got a number of those places. It's always best to go into that place and ask someone before you go buying online, because you'll get good advice from the people selling those soft boxes. I'd rather not recommend various places, but if you look around, there's probably 4 or 5 places in Auckland. You'll find a couple of places in Wellington as well. So it's just a matter of shopping around, but I'd avoid buying the stuff online. Go into the shop, have a look at it, and get some good advice from the salesperson that generally knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Great. I think just another thing, because I think when people look at prices and they start seeing it going up, it's you don't just use it for products. Yes, today's webinar is about products, but our other webinars, we've talked about content for social media, for other spaces in your business, you know, your About Us page, taking photos of your team members. So try not to just think it's a cost just for product photos. It's actually a cost that you can use ongoing for social media posts, for team members, welcoming team members, and for lots of other areas of the website. So it's probably, you know, long term, there's some investment in there for what you can get out of it.
Indeed, often it's social media, the quality of the images or the size of the image, it doesn't have to be so huge.
Yes.
If you're doing huge posters, yes, you've got to have a very high quality image. But if you're just putting for social network, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, the image doesn't have to be that
quite as polished,
huge, or the quality should still be there, but not necessarily the size.
Right.
Cool. So we've got now a few around how to photograph certain items. So the first one is just, how do you photograph crystals that have reflections?
Oh.
Yes. Recently, I was working with a gemologist from Australia on the, who came in with all these emeralds and diamonds. She asked me how I could photograph those. And again, each item was quite different. Diamonds have a high, what they call a reflective index. So when the light hits it, almost 100% of that light is bounced around or away. There's nothing really absorbed on a diamond. So often there are many facets on a crystal. Again, my thumb rule would be to use a very soft light source, or a large soft box, or good bounce.
Yes.
Again, lighting underneath can be more effective. So you're just looking at 100% light coming through a piece of acrylic.
Right.
And you place the diamond or crystal on that acrylic and light underneath. That can be very effective as well. But generally speaking, when you're getting small crystals, again, the macro lens is essential. And there's a technique a lot of gem photographers will use. It's called photo stacking. So rather than use f22 to get all the depth of field, you take a f5.6 or f8 or something, and you photograph the top layer, the mid, center, and the base, and you get 3 different photographs. Each one has a part out of focus and a part in focus. And in Photoshop, there's a thing you can use called photo stacking.
Right.
So you end up getting the whole zone of that crystal perfectly sharp. And that's the big thing with small items.
Interesting.
When you get down to a very small a piece of gem stone or whatever it is, the focus is a real issue. How do you do that? So again, the lighting on that would be, I would suggest try a top light or a backlight, or maybe even both, but generally just one light source is the best. People often have these little tents, they put them in. They can be okay, but you can't control any shadows because it's 100% white light coming from all directions. It's still used on some items, but from my experience with small items, it's better to have your own lighting rather than a tent.
Right.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And now asking around, Simon and Sarah are asking, how do you photograph a pillar candle, one that's not in a jar? Because your example earlier was in a jar.
Sorry, what candle?
Yeah, a pillar candle. I think they're the ones that are just, it's straight wax. There's nothing surrounding it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, if it's a solid block of candle, I would tend to take that as a 3/4 view, because you want to look at the top of the candle. Again, they're quite reflective, depending on the wax that you're seeing. But anything that's round, if you have light coming in flat on the front of that round surface, you tend to lose its 3D effect. So I would light it slightly from the side, so there's a shadow on the round side. So then you've got your 3-dimensional effect. So you have a bit of a shadow being cast on that round surface.
Yes.
So, really, I'm just trying to see if I can do a demonstration here. We do have a.
Oh, you do have a candle.
Yeah, there we go.
Hang fire. Even got a candle.
Live demonstration.
I'm not sure what that. You can see the reflections there. Now, could you pass me that light?
This one.
This one? Yeah, I'm just gonna. So by lighting on one side, you'll see the shadow. It's a bit strong there, but you can see the shadow on the other side.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to create, to give that 3D effect. And also, this has been used a bit in a very dusty. But there's usually a little wicks thing. You want to see that in terms of its scaling, what it's all about. But again, just giving that roundness is all to do with the lighting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It helped.
And we've got 2 questions that are slightly the same. So the first one is just, so if I'm taking pictures of food at home and don't have lighting equipment, what can I do to make the food still look good? And then Florence has also just asked around what kind of artificial lighting setup you would suggest for food as well.
Okay. The first question, if you don't have any lighting, again, window lighting. So place the food near. Here's your window, here's your bench, the light coming through the window. And that will, again, looking onto the shadow side of that food is going to make it look pretty good. You can have
so you don't take the photo of the bright side, you take the photo of the shadow side.
And that gives that food that 3-dimensional crunchy look. It looks more inviting. And also if it's something glossy like a tomato or a piece of avocado, anything that's got a glossy surface, the light will reflect back into the camera, which you'll get a lovely sheen over the top of the food as well.
Right.
So just using the window lighting and getting fairly close to it, that will soften it off, and just a white sheet of card to reflect back into that shadow if you need to. In terms of the artificial lighting, if you wanted to, some people buy LED lights, and they could be okay as long as they're bright enough. But generally speaking, if you're in a room with no lights, those LED lights are fine. But if you put them, like we've got an LED light running here at the moment, it's mixing with all the other light.
Yeah.
So again, and there's a problem that can occur unless you've got a tripod, that the shutter speeds can be pretty slow. So you've got to be careful that you're working with shutter speeds and apertures. Whereas with flash, it's basically you can use any shutter speed you like.
Right.
It's you can use 200th of a second, or you can use 100th of a second. The flash is dependent on the aperture and the power of the flash. So with LED lights, you're back to shutter speed, aperture, and ISO.
So you've got to know a lot more technical stuff.
Yeah, and
if you haven't got that flash lighting.
Generally speaking, so I tend to use the flash because it's very consistent. LED lights are primarily used for video. So if you're doing video, that's fine. That's really good. Hopefully that answers that question.
And I guess probably another key bit is sometimes you just have to practice as well. Because you probably have to take quite a few photos to then go, yep, I got it right this one time.
Although it really shouldn't be a stab in the dark.
Yeah, no. And the last one is more actually about Zoom conferencing, and I'll answer half of it probably is do you have simple techniques for improving your camera and lighting for Zoom conferencing? So one thing from me is I know that I've recently been upgraded to a HD webcam. And that's just actually made me look a lot more crisper on Zoom, but where to talk about. But what it's also done though is it's opened up my background, so I'm not so much in a box. But I mean, again, it comes down to spend and what you want to spend on that and what you're using it for. But any lighting techniques for Zoom conferencing?
Light on us, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare the light on you and Mark, it's fantastic to my light. I've got full spotlights and they're absolutely useless. I have no professional lights to use here, can you believe? So yeah, I mean, we've got three different pictures here, all with different intensity of light, and it's incredible the difference it makes, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
really, yeah, totally. I actually have a question though, and what would you consider the most common problem with taking product photography?
The most it does depend on the product, but the problems are the perspective.
Yes.
As we talked about, you know, if you have a series of bottles, for example,
Yeah.
and you're shooting 3/4, you're going to get a perspective shift.
Yes.
You're all going to have angles on the side.
Yes.
So looking at the perspective is really important. If you've got some tiles, and let's just assume that's a tile, this is a mouse pad, but again, do you want to show the thickness of the tile?
Yeah. So it's the perspective,
and
not
then,
just showing the
and
flat
if
tile.
you shoot it 3/4 on, that shows that thickness, then you'll get a tapering as well, which can look quite natural as long as it's in context with your stage, if you like. Does that tile look good by itself, or does it need something else to support it? Yeah, so there are lots of problems, reflection being another one, highly reflective items.
I think from what you were saying before, Photoshop is important.
Yes, it is.
Or
yes.
some kind of manipulation after you've taken the photo.
Yes. A lot of people use Lightroom, which is fantastic. It allows you to adjust the colors, the contrast. You can tweak little parts of the photograph or the image or the product. Photoshop can do that as well, but it allows you to add other images together, such as that scene on the beach with those macrons sitting in the foreground. So in other words, Photoshop has a series of layers that you can use. And it also means that you can isolate each product on a layer and then adjust them where you want to. So that's the huge advantage in product photography, is the final presentation of that product.
Yeah, and I was really interested to hear before when you said like it's 60% photo,
yes,
40% Photoshop. That's quite a big.
It can be,
yeah.
It could be the other way around. It could be a 40% snapshot, and then how do I get the best out of that photo? Then you spend quite a bit of time in Photoshop to make it look really good. So
there's a lot of Photoshop courses out there.
Yes.
What would you recommend?
Well, we run them. Often the training, people like to learn online. If there's a company called lynda.com, and it can be quite expensive.
Yeah.
At the photographic colleges we taught Photoshop at, they would pay up to about $4,000 for a license for 1 year to teach a whole series of lynda.com videos, which are very good because they've got trained people, and they're about 2 or 3 minutes long, so you're not falling asleep halfway through a long.
But I think that the thing is, if you're wanting to learn Photoshop, I mean, you could spend years learning it, right?
Yes.
But if you're wanting to learn it to taking product photography, you should go to a product photography Photoshop photo course, which is what you guys specialize in, right? You're not teaching the whole Photoshop.
The whole package, So often when I go to a person that needs to know Photoshop, they're wanting to do a particular thing or a series of things.
Yeah.
So if they're using product photography, we say, well, this is what you deal with. These are the techniques you can get the best out of your products.
Yeah, I mean, we found that 3-hour one-on-ones was the perfect way to do it, because then this way the client learns in the comfort of their own home, and the session is geared totally to their level and what they need to know. So it's, again, it goes back to this idea of it being a short, sharp course. And Mark does these, don't you, Mark?
Another thing with online programs is you can't ask questions.
No.
Or if you go through steps and you miss one out, and then you're left in midair.
I'm someone who tried to learn how to do Photoshop because I thought it's just a good skill to have. There's so many times, but it was just like this, and it was I gave up after about a week. You give up, and I have nothing. I've not learned anything practical in a week's worth of effort. A 3-hour session sounds good, dear.
No, you would. You'd be totally hooked after 3 hours, because it really is. It's a fantastic program, and the results are so rapid, and they change your photography instantly. I mean, I love it. I really do. It's totally addictive.
You're bringing the best out of that product.
You've taken this beautiful photo, right? Yes. And you just need to put those tweaks to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think that brings us to the end of our questions section today. Very good. Found there was a lot of information in there. I certainly have learnt today. So that's really important. I'm sure everyone else has as well. So just to do a quick recap. So as more and more businesses move to the online or digital space, it is important that you keep evolving your online presence to stand out. One important way to do this is to ensure that your images, both products and others used in the website, assist in this. So what we do know is having quality product images are essential to improving conversion, conveying quality, and building trust on your website. The opportunity right now is to review the product images you have and put a plan in place to start updating those that are of less quality. Our prediction are that businesses who utilize their product images as another part of their digital selling toolbox will be more successful and will help their customers be able to visualize the product better. My recommendation for you today is to focus on your top selling products or the products you get the most queries about, and start updating those images first, because that's how if they're your best sellers, why not improve what they look like? And also, I think if you're not sure and you're sort of new to the photography world, or product images aren't really going to be your strong suit, please reach out to someone like Three Little Wishes who can offer support, whether it's them coming out to actually do it for you or providing you advice and guidance through their courses or their one-on-ones. I would highly recommend getting involved in that aspect of it. So just a little bit about Zeald. Zeald have helped over 15,000 businesses transform digitally over the last 20 years. If you would like any support with marketing as well, or your website or digital strategy, please get in touch. We provide free digital strategy or website audit sessions with our digital business strategists. We also provide services under the Regional Business Partners program. So please reach out if you're interested in looking into that. I think another thing for most of us already know around this, but our Get e-commerce movement. So due to lockdown in our economy this year, Zeald has put in place an offer for people to get a free website build with a no sale, no fee for 12 months hosting plan. So if you haven't already, check out our website, zeald.com, to see this offer and find out more about it. Or if you know someone who needs to get online and get a website, please share it with them so that they can get online and see this. And then last but not least, our next webinar is a fantastic one to cover as we start to get to the end of the year. It's how to build a digital marketing plan, and presented by Tom, our digital business strategist. He will take you through practical advice to get your marketing plan together for 2021. Scary saying that already. I would like to say a very special thanks to our guest speakers today, Debbie and Mark from Three Little Wishes. Really appreciate your valuable insights and tips that you've shared with us today, and also all those answers. I'm sure it's helped quite a few people. And a big thank you to all that attended today as well. If you know anyone that might benefit from attending these in the future, please feel free to share our link or our emails that we send out for these. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to seeing you here next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.